I'm Melanie Revilla. I'm a tenure track professor at Universitat Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, and I'm also the Deputy Director of REXEM, the Research and Expertise Center for Survey Methodology. I'm a survey methodologist and I've been working mainly on measurement errors. Since 2020, I'm the principal investigator of the ERC-funded project Web Data Hub, which investigates new measurement opportunities that could complement or replace survey questions such that voice answers or visual data, but also digital trace data collected through meters. And I've been collaborating with Netquest since 2012. Netquest has a lot of experience in working with academics, which provides a lot of flexibility. They operate in many different countries, across different places. They are in Europe, but also in the US and in Latin American countries. And in many cases, they have also very large panels, over 1 million active panelists in some cases. So this provides opportunities to do cross-national research with comparable samples across different countries. In addition, this is also interesting if you have very specific target population. For instance, we were interested in one of our studies only in parents having children in first, third or fifth grade of primary school in Spain. So if you have such a specific target population, you actually need to have really large panel, but also very good profiling information, meaning information about the characteristics of the panelist, such that you can really invite the proper panelists to your study. And another big advantage is that they have very strong programming skills. So if you have, as we have in our research, some specific demands in terms of programming, for instance, we were interested in these voice answers, or sometimes we are interested in very detailed paradata, for instance, the time that people are really active on each of the questions in the survey. Well, Netquest has the capabilities of programming such more advanced functions, and each time we have been asking them for these more complex programming tasks, they have been able to do it. So first, they have their own panel, which is not always the case of the competitors, and besides, they are recruiting people by invitation. So this allows to minimize the risk of having professional respondents or people that are registering several times to the panel. And in addition, they are really committed to data quality, which actually is in the first place the reason why I started collaborating with them. Behavioral data that we also call metadata or digital trace data collected through meters include normally at least the URL of the web page that the people are visiting. But in addition, in the behavioral data that Netquest is providing, you get more information. You get information about search terms, about the time that people spend on each page, and also in-app activity since recently, and potentially the HTML information. So it's a very complete behavioral data compared to some of the competitors. In addition, this data can be collected through different devices, PC, but also smartphones and tablets. So we have the data from the different devices that people use to go online, which again is a great advantage compared to some of the data of the competitors. And since these data are collected passively, the participants do not need to do a lot of effort. They only need to accept, of course, to install such a tracking application, and also to install it at the very beginning, but then the data is collected automatically. So for many years, surveys have been used to collect the data in many studies and across many different disciplines. In particular, they are really useful, the surveys, if you are interested in subjective variables like attitudes and opinions. But surveys have also been used for a long time to measure more objective variables, such as online behaviors. And in that case, we can actually think that the behavioral data can really complement and even replace some of the survey questions, because they can provide these measures in a more objective way. So we can observe what people are doing instead of asking them. So I think the first opportunity really is this replacing of some of the survey questions. But there are also new opportunities in terms of measuring new concepts, for instance, concepts that were not measured before using survey data, because we were thinking it was just too complicated to operationalize such concept into questions. And then there are also many other different possible ways of combining both survey and behavioral data. A couple of examples would be a study, for instance, where we used the behavioral data in order to trigger a survey that was asking about the event of interest. So in our case, what we did is to detect using the behavioral data when people apply for a job online, and this immediately triggered a survey in which we ask questions that we could not answer just with the behavioral data, such that why did you apply to this specific job offer? But also it reduced the time between the survey and the event of interest, which improved things compared to a conventional survey. Another example, completely different, would be a use of the metadata of this behavioral data in order to check, for instance, if people are not looking up for answers when you're asking questions that are about knowledge in a survey. Well, because behavioral data are free of recall errors and are also less susceptible of having social desirability bias, which are two big issues in survey data, we can have better measurements in terms of accuracy, more accurate measurements. So this is one of the potential advantages of this behavioral data compared to survey. Another key advantage is their level of details. So these data are really granular. So it means that you can do really analysis of the process very in depth. These data are also collected in a continuous way. So you can actually look at how things are changing over time. And these data are collected in a continuous way, which means that the data are present. So you can also use the data to go back in time and study how things have been changing, for instance, after a big event that was probably unexpected. An example would be when the COVID pandemic started, so people were not expecting that, but a lot of the behaviors of the people changed because the data were already corrected. You can use this data to look, for instance, how things were before the COVID started, during the COVID and after the COVID pandemic. But that said, it's also important to note that this kind of behavioral data also have their own limitations. So if you want to use them, you should also be careful about taking them into account. We have been using this kind of data to study many different topics, actually. For instance, to study things about media diet, but also to study ChatGPT use or to study job search, online job search. And I think in all these studies, the main argument why we wanted to use the behavioral data is that they could provide more accurate measures, but also the level of detail that we could get with this data. So for instance, in the job search study, what we did is to look at every visit that the panelists did to a job search website during a period of 9 months. So it's really unlikely that you can get equivalent data with survey data or even with diaries data. For such a long period, it seems kind of impossible to ask people to report really about every visit to a job search website that they've been doing. But using the behavioral data, we were able to really get key insight about the process of how people search for jobs online across also different socio-demographic groups. Well, as I said, I think these data have been used already across many different disciplines and fields. They have been used in particular to look at the topic of media diet and fake news, but there are also applications in market research where people are looking at which kind of product people are looking for or buying online. There are also applications in the field of health studies. For instance, one study used the metadata to detect changes in the mood of people that suffer of bipolar disorders. So I think there are really applications across many different disciplines. And I think also that actually in the next years, we will see people using them in even more different topics and case studies. Go for it, I would say them, go for it. I think Netquest will support you during all the project and also will give you a lot of flexibility. But just think about planning with some time, because especially if you have some specific programming wishes, so you want them to program more, develop functionalities, for instance, or you have more requirement in terms of the sampling that you want to use, it could be necessary to plan with some more time, so you are sure that you can also double check at all steps what is done.